It's a high-stakes game of chicken playing out behind closed doors in the nation's capital. Raise the debt ceiling, the amount of money the U.S. can borrow to pay its bills, or let the nation default on its debt. Florida Republican Connie Mack says he's got a plan to balance the budget by cutting 1 cent of every federal dollar spent. He joined me now. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
So first, let me begin with the basic question. You don't think it's such a big deal if we don't raise the debt ceiling and we actually have to sort of delay payment on either T-bills, reborrowing, anything like that?
Well, actually, I would disagree. I do think it's a big deal to raise the debt ceiling.
You don't think it's a big deal if we don't do it?
I think that we shouldn't raise the debt ceiling. And in fact, instead of having a discussion about raising the debt ceiling, we ought to be having a discussion about how do we cut spending so we don't have to raise it. And I'd further say, why have a debt ceiling if all you're going to do is raise it when you approach it?
All right, look, the response to that is why pass bills requiring spending if you're not going to either tax the money to raise the taxes through revenue or else borrow to spend it. But let me ask you, what is your plan real quick? And obviously I disagree with you about the impact of not raising it. Give us real quickly what your plan is.
So what we would do is cut 1% of spending every year for 6 years. In the 7th year, we'd cap spending to 18% of GDP. In the 8th year, we balanced the budget, and after 10 years, we cut $7.5 trillion in spending. Okay,
now just so folks understand, the trend line in spending goes up every year. You're saying not only not raise it that way, but cut it 1%. So the impact in year 2, 2013, would be $143 billion. Those are your numbers, I believe.
That's correct.
Okay, now, you don't want to raise any more revenue.
I don't think we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem.
So by the way, you don't want to close any loopholes, for instance.
So what I want to do is I want to cut 1% out of every federal dollar. That's 1 penny. Everybody back home has had to cut a lot more than 1 penny out of their home budget, and every business out there has had to cut more than 1 penny out of their professional budget.
All right, fair enough point. So in year 2, we'd be cutting $143 billion from where the trend line would otherwise be.
Out of a $3.7 trillion budget.
Precisely correct. Now, do you specify how those cuts are allocated across government spending?
So here's what we do. We say that the Congress and the President act together. If they can't come up with the 1% requisite, then it's across the board.
Across the board, without regard to, you're not going to pick between defense, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare.
That's correct. Now, here's the thing. So you know, that's a big stick for the Congress. So the Congress and the President must work together to make sure we come up with the cuts so we don't have to touch those programs.
But just so it's clear what you're saying then, since as you and I both know, about 2/3 of government spending is in the entitlements and defense, what you're saying is 2/3 of that, 143, or call it $100 billion roughly, $100 billion in year 2 comes out of Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and defense spending in year 2.
What we're saying is that if the Congress and the President fail to act to make the 1% requisite cut, then it would be across the board. So if they do a 0.5%, then if the Congress does a 0.5%, then there would only be a 0.5% across the board.
That sounds eminently reasonable, but I want to ask you, since you're to a little bit, you're copping out saying, we'll do it across the board, make the choices for us. Where would you do it? And I've seen your list, including $15 billion of sales of excess property. Look, that may be fine in year 1. I could dispute the number, put it aside. It's not there to sell it in year 2 unless you're Bernie Madoff, right? You already sold it. So in year 2, how are you going to allocate that money? So in year 3, it's $278 billion.
So here's what I'd say. This is a democracy, not a dictatorship. Right. It's not my decision alone to make. But it is the decision of the Congress. The Congress must act responsibly, and the President must work with us. If we work together, we can make the 1% requisite cuts. If not, then everyone is held accountable for the 1% across the board.
But look, by the time you get to year 4, you're talking about $468 billion.
Out of a $3.8 trillion budget.
Seconds wind down. Most of it coming out of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. At least half of it, right?
If the Congress fails to act.
So are you saying you would take $200 billion, you would be eliminating Social Security, you'd be eliminating Medicare and Medicaid?
What I would say is the Congress and the President working together can make the cuts necessary. If not, then it'll be across the board.
Okay, and again, no loophole closings. You wouldn't want the 12. You know, we saw a list today of all sorts of companies making billions of dollars in profit, not paying a penny in taxes. That doesn't alter your complex of answers to this. You're not saying we got to simplify the tax code and make them pay something.
Of course we need to simplify the tax code, but what I'm talking about is spending. So if we cut 1% a year for 6 years and cap it at 18% of GDP, we will balance the budget in the 8th year.
Okay, and by the year 2018, these are your numbers you gave us here today, about $1.1 trillion, the vast majority of which is going to come out of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
I would say that the Congress and the President better start working together to make these cuts so we don't have to go into those
default position. Look, I hate to say it, when you're talking that much, there's no place else to take it. You and I both know that 12%, only 12% of the budget is non-defense discretionary. All the other stuff people like to talk about because it's easier. the vast majority is going to have to come out of the entitlement. You and I can agree on that.
So what I would agree with you is that we need to get serious about reforms in Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. And so far, the Congress has failed to act. And the Congress and the President need to work together to make those changes so we can come up with the savings.
I agree with you about the failure to act so far, but would you raise the Social Security age immediately to get to this number?
Again, it's not a dictatorship.
But we're making you dictator. No, one last question. You got the power, Congressman.
I refuse to be dictator. That's not what I believe in. I believe in freedom.
But would you do it? We all believe in freedom. Would you do it? Raise the security?
No, I would say this is up to the Congress. We need to work together with the President to come up with the reforms needed.
Interesting idea. Here's what we're going to do. I want you to come back when we have more time. I want you to tell me exactly where those cuts are coming, because that's where the rubber meets the road. All right. Thank you, Congressman Mack.